Yes, Prashant.
Hello, sir. It's great to meet you after QIP sessions.
Sir, I have appeared in 2020 examination also, and this level of examination preparation to was equivalent to that. The feeling was, yes, I'm sitting in a real examination like feeling.
Actually, sir, test was a difficult one.
But even in those subjects, you might have faced difficulties.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
that is where the exam simulation comes into play. You
Yes.
understand how to keep your nerves in the exam, how to avoid silly mistakes, how to read the questions carefully. So
Yes,
it's a
sir.
match day. The exam is a match day. Particular questions were asked. What was the logic behind asking these questions? Next thing that I would like to ask you is, why is the prelims examination so difficult? Okay, so keep that in mind. That is why we keep on reiterating, take as many tests as possible. And that is why pre-parikshan has been specifically designed for giving you that kind of simulation and understanding and feel of the examination before the real examination takes place, right? So how was the test? How many of you didn't appear in the test and still are here for the discussion? Anyone? Write it in chat box. Okay, it was nice. Perfect. I hope everybody is able to listen to me. Test was easy. That's good. Good that it was easy for you. So I would like to listen to some of the feedbacks that you have, that what all you learned from this test. You can raise your hands and I'll allow you to speak so that we get an idea as to what exactly are your takeaways. And from there on, we'll go on discussing this paper and devising a strategy for improving more or improving your scores in the prelims examination. But before that, I'd like to tell you that this is a discussion for around 2 to 2.5 hours. So I'll be taking the first part. In the second part, Baswa sir will take the questions that were from economy section in this test, okay? Like we did in the first pre-parikshan test. And I'll be dealing with all the other sections, plus an overall strategy, how you could have improved your scores and how to better perform at the prelims level. And because already just, I think 50 days are left for the prelims examination. And I assume most of you are appearing in the prelims of 2021. So can anyone share his or her feedback as to how was your experience regarding this test? What all were your takeaways? And how did you analyze the paper, or what are your takeaways from this analysis? Can anybody share the experience? You can raise your hand, I'll allow you. So we have Manisha, who has raised her hand, and we have 3 more people. I'll allow Manisha. Yes, Manisha, you unmute yourself and you can share your feedback.
Sir, I have appeared in 2020 examination also, and this level of examination preparation to was equivalent to that. The feeling was, yes, I'm sitting in a real examination like feeling.
Yes, yes. Thank you
It
so
was
much.
a very good experience to me, sir.
Perfect. That was the whole idea of designing this paper. It was designed based on most of the previous precedents that were questions that have been asked in the UPSC, or they were inspired from current affairs. So it had a lot of diversity, plus the diversity of the questions, even within a subject, was taken care of. So I think that might have helped you. Fine. Let's hear Pooja Sarkar now. Thank you so much, Manisha. Yes, Pooja, unmute yourself.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Actually, sir, test was a difficult one. I thought I should score more in this test because my strong areas are 4. I have prepared thoroughly in that 4 subjects.
Okay.
But by seeing the questions, it's so difficult to answer, sir.
So that exactly is the purpose of this discussion.
Yeah.
You might all have studied some of the topics very well. For example, most of you might have studied polity well, or some have a very good understanding of history. That might be an area of interest also for you. But even in those subjects, you might have faced difficulties.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes.
that is where the exam simulation comes into play. You
Yes.
understand how to keep your nerves in the exam, how to avoid silly mistakes, how to read the questions carefully. So
Yes,
it's a
sir.
match day. The exam is a match day. You are
Yes,
there, you have to be totally present in the paper on that particular day without carrying any baggage that I am strong in this subject or I am weak in this particular subject. Or if there is a question from polity, I have to attempt that question any which ways, if it's easy, difficult, no matter what. So such preconceived notions will not be very helpful in solving the questions in the examination. So that one thing should be taken care of by all the aspirants, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Fine. So that is what the difficulty you might have faced, I think.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Next, I would like to ask Jeev. Yes, Jeev, share your experience.
Sir, actually, in some questions I feel difficulty when I was attempting that. Some questions I never heard about the context or the relevance, like where this has been covered in current affairs of or DNS as well as in PDF, etc.
Perfect. We will discuss that also. Why particular questions were asked? What was the logic behind asking these questions? Because some of the questions might have been inspired from the current affairs, but they were not directly based on the current affairs. We all know that current affairs has also a base of static portion in the syllabus, isn't it? For example, if something is happening in a state legislature, it also has some content related to state legislature. We already have a content in the core books or the Constitution of India. So what are those provisions? So that can be one way of asking the question, not directly asking what exactly happened there. So that is where the application of knowledge comes into play. We will discuss that. Fine. Okay, so we have got some suggestions and some observations by the students here. Next thing that I would like to ask you is, why is the prelims examination so difficult? Or why is it such the paper becomes really overwhelming for most of us when we appear in the examination? For example, if you have seen this test, and most of you, if you have appeared in this test, you might have felt overwhelmed. Okay, I'm not able to answer even those questions which I knew very well. So what exactly do you think is the reason for this thing? You can share in the chat box. Okay, we have some people sharing their observations here. I'll allow Prashant Goel to speak here. Yes, Prashant.
Hello, sir. It's great to meet you after QIP sessions. And sir, right now I have to answer about the second question of my experience about the paper. That why UPSC prelims is tough or the
why the prelims
sir,
examination is tough? I would like to I would like you to answer that.
Okay,
question.
sir. And the paper was good, but sir, in some area I think that in history we have seen that the paper was extremely tough, because in history, if we go by the last 10-year explanation, it's more of a very NCERT level, except 2-3 questions in every year. It will be there.
Yes.
But
Yes.
this time the questions were very more specific, like out of 15 questions, 10 were not of NCERT.
Yes, that is a subject level analysis of history you are saying, right?
Yes, sir.
That's good.
So
Okay.
it was like that in some questions, it was very tough, sir.
So UPSC is now moving on some difficult questions these days, right? That is
Yes,
your
sir.
understanding of the
In
paper.
every topic, they will put
And
2-3
that is why,
difficult questions.
okay, and that is why it is becoming difficult by the day.
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So I'll share something here. See, what happens is that when we study, we usually focus on one particular subject. For example, if on some fine day you are studying polity, or for almost 3 to 5 days you have studied polity, you have revised it properly, and then if you take out the questions from the polity from this particular paper or any previous year question paper, you might be able to solve majority of the questions then. But what happens in the real examination is that we are overwhelmed by the diversity of the questions that are there. The questions are not just from one topic. They are not just from polity. They are not just from history. So on that day, we have to tackle multiple subjects, which include polity, history, geography, environment, science and technology, IR, each and everything. And that is why the prelims examination becomes overwhelming for majority of the aspirants who are appearing in the paper. So that is one thing that needs to be taken care of. And that is where exam simulation comes into play. If you have not practiced that kind of thing beforehand, before the real prelims examination takes place, majority of you are going to face difficulty in that scenario. Okay, so keep that in mind. That is why we keep on reiterating, take as many tests as possible. And that is why pre-parikshan has been specifically designed for giving you that kind of simulation and understanding and feel of the examination before the real examination takes place, right? This is one thing you might have also felt, that even after studying so well, you might have missed out on very silly questions in the examination, right? So that is one understanding. And that is why prelims becomes difficult, because there are a lot of questions, the diversity is there, the questions are spread out in the paper. You're reading a question from polity, the next question might be from history, and the next one might be from science and technology. You might not be able to recall each and everything about these questions. And that is why prelims becomes really difficult for most of us when we face the paper. So if you have practiced that thing beforehand in the tests or the full length tests and the pre-parikshan tests that we have designed, you might be able to cool your nerves in the real examination, right? So that is how things work in the prelims examination, and that is what makes it really difficult for most of us. So at the outset, I would like to set the agenda for this class. First and foremost thing that you need to focus on is limiting your sources. So these all points we will be discussing during the course of this lecture, and I'll be highlighting these points, like why you need to limit your resources. Secondly, you need to focus on improving your accuracy in the examination. That is one important factor. And for improving the accuracy, you need knowledge plus how to apply that knowledge or use it in the real exam like conditions. So that is second important takeaway that you need to focus on. Also, third important art for scoring more marks in the prelims examination is choosing the questions wisely. Which all questions you are going to attempt and which all questions you are going to skip. It is not necessary that you attempt all the 100 questions that are there in the paper, isn't it? Many of us have heard about the strategies on YouTube and other channels that we need to attempt 100 questions, or we have to go with some preconceived notion of attempting 90 questions only. Some will say only attempt 60 questions in the paper. So don't go with that preconceived notions, because UPSC will vary its difficulty level. If you look at the prelims examination of 2016, the cutoff was 116 marks, isn't it? Or 114 marks, something like that. But then the cutoff in last 3 years has only been 100. So who will decide how many questions to attempt in the exam? So based on the difficulty level that we are facing while solving the questions, we will decide, okay, this question is easy, I'll attempt this, or I know about this question, that is why I'm attempting it. You need not go with any preconceived mindset of attempting such and such number of questions. For example, if you go in a paper and you are comfortable with just 70 questions, let's say. But in that preconceived mindset, you will think that, okay, I have to attempt 95 any which ways. And if you mark the next 25 questions, and if 19 to 20 questions out of that are wrong, that will drastically reduce your score, isn't it? So that is why this decision should be made on the spot in the examination, based on your understanding, how many questions you are able to solve. So focus on a question to question approach. Choose questions wisely. You can skip questions as well in the examination, and I'll show you one of the aspirants in this paper has performed extremely well by using the strategy of being selective in choosing the questions and improving and performing at a high accuracy rate. We'll look at that factor. And finally, we will understand in this discussion what exactly is meant by analyzing the paper. Most of you might have analyzed the paper. You might have seen, okay, I have marked this question incorrect because this information was not there with me. That does not mean this is not exactly the analysis. This analysis thing that you will understand in this discussion will be helpful for you in the test series also in the coming days. So after going through a paper, how to analyze things, how to go back to your basic sources, how to understand why such question has been asked, or while applying, you will also understand as to, okay, if current affairs is such, what is the related static part of that? What we are exactly doing in the DNS also. You might have seen that, isn't it? So that thing also needs to be understood properly. So these are a few things that we'll focus on. And the major idea is for you to improve your scores in the prelims examination. So let's start with some basic facts about the prelims examination. What is your competition that you are going to face? We have already seen that, but we'll again revise it. If you have attended the last pre-pariksha test or the discussion of that test, we have already discussed these things. So let me start with first thing. Okay, so what you see on your screen is a flow chart. 90% of the aspirants or majority of us are in this trap of improving upon the number of sources and gathering more information. You know what are the majority of the queries that we get from the aspirants? Sir, is DNS enough? Is focus enough? Will Lakshmikant suffice for polity? Is Bipan Chandra enough for history? So that is where the major focus of each and every aspirant is. Okay, so that is where the major focus of each and every aspirant is. It is on knowledge gathering and information gathering. So information gathering can be simple. For example, you learn about all the articles of the fundamental rights. You learn that there are such and such numbers of the number of fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution. 11, or there are certain amount of duties. There are certain amount of DPSP. These are the articles. This can be information. But then information is just not enough for cracking the prelims examination. It is the application of the knowledge that will play a very crucial role in your prelims examination or even in the mains examination. That is why UPSC is different from the other exams that are held across our country, isn't it? That is what makes the UPSC examination or the civil services examination very unique. So in that manner, we need to customize the information as per the requirement of the civil services examination. And that is where the role of previous year questions come into play, because this highlights what exactly is UPSC demanding. If I'm studying something related to, let's say, modern history, and if I'm reading non-cooperation movement, then what all, or from which perspective do we need to study the non-cooperation movement? Who will tell us? Of course, syllabus is one thing which tells us the diversity of coverage that we need to cover, but the exact nature in which the questions will be asked or have been asked needs to be analyzed first through the previous year questions. And that is where processing the knowledge that you already have and application of the knowledge comes into play. And lastly, for improving your score in the prelims examination, you need to focus on a very clear-cut attempting strategy for the paper. For that, you already have learned or heard about most of the things that are written on your screen. Firstly, we need to calm our mind, and we have to go in the paper with cool nerves. I've already told you that we need to understand that in the prelims examination, we have to decide things on that day only. We don't have to go with any preconceived notions, isn't it? It's a match day. For example, if you have prepared really well for square cuts, and if you're not getting any ball where you can play your square cuts, that practice will be futile. So go with an open mind, play the shots according to the ball that is being delivered to you. That is what is required. And for that, you need to calm your nerves in the examination. Second important thing is minimizing the silly mistakes. Minimizing the silly mistakes will again require presence of mind in the paper, reading the questions carefully. If something like incorrect or correct is mentioned in the question, you need to understand that thing properly. Then the next important thing is choosing the questions rightly and then skipping the questions rightly. And finally, there is no common strategy for each and every one. You have to develop a strategy based on your strengths and weaknesses. Okay. And how will you decide what is your strength and weakness? You will decide this by taking n number of tests and also at least some mock tests before the prelims examination to understand, okay, this is my strength, that if I attempt 90 questions, I have a tendency of marking 30 questions incorrect. So that's my weakness. I need to work upon this. Or somebody might have an issue, okay, I get carried away in the examination by looking at the number of questions, and even after knowing the questions, I'm not able to answer the question. So that might be one weakness you can work upon. Or you might have a strength, okay, my accuracy rate is very high. So my accuracy rate is, when it is high, I need not get stressed in the examination about attempting more questions. My focus should be on accuracy. That is my strength. I'll work on that. So that will be the key part of your strategy in the examination. Then already let us look at some of the basic facts related to our competition that we are going to face. Already we know that 10 lakh people fill the form, 5 lakh people take the prelims examination, around 10,000 to 12,000 aspirants clear the examination, and 3,000 are called for interviews, 1,000 become the civil servants. Our concern is getting into this 10,000 to 12,000 people who get shortlisted for the mains examination. But before this, let us look at the cutoffs of last 3 years or 4 years. So in 2019, it was around 98. Again, in 2018, it was around 98. In 2017, it was 105. In 2020, based on the analysis, it is expected that it might hover around 100. So then what would be a good attempt in such a paper? When we note that the papers these days are on a difficult trajectory, you need to be very clear that for getting a score of 100, you need to focus on improving your accuracy. Attempting 100 questions can be dangerous. I'm not denying that attempting 100 questions is a bad strategy. It can be a good strategy for some people, only for exceptional people, but it is not applicable for each and every aspirant. For example, in the paper, if you attempt 85 questions, out of these 85 questions, if you get 20 questions, let's say, incorrect. Okay. So this means you are left with just 65 correct questions. And if we divide it by 3, it comes around 7. So out of 65, if we deduct 7, it will come somewhere around 58, which is high accuracy. So that is what should be our focus, isn't it? So that is how you understand the nature of cutoff and what should be your strategy in the prelims examination. Then we have already discussed in the last discussion that there are different type of students and different types of attempt strategies that they devise. For example, there are some exceptional souls we are not talking about, of course. They have high attempt and high accuracy rate in the examination. They will attempt 98 and they will have 75 correct. So these people are out of danger, but we are not concerned about these people. We are concerned about those people and maximizing or improving our scores and getting into the list of civil services examination or the prelims examination. Okay. Then there is, I have already outlined, there are people with normal attempt and high accuracy. This is the safest zone to be in the prelims examination. And most of the aspirants who are preparing are hovering somewhere around here, who need support, who need assistance, who need proper guidance for coming from this zone, which is, I would say, vulnerable zone, into a safe zone. Okay. So that is where, if you are attempting normally and you have normal accuracy, which means that your accuracy sometimes is good, sometimes is bad, you need to focus more on improving your accuracy and reach this level. And that is why this discussion, let's not talk about low attempt, low accuracy, low attempt or high attempt, low accuracy. These people are already very vulnerable and they need to focus more on gathering knowledge and improving their exam temperament. Fine. Then the distribution of questions, you should all be aware. We have seen already in the last discussion that economy takes the lion's share in the paper, which is around 25 questions. Then the next important section is environment. And of course, polity, geography, these are some static portions. So these are few things that you need to focus on as far as the basic nature of the examination is concerned. After understanding this, let us look at the report of our examination or how things went in the pre-parikshan test. Is it visible now? Okay, so can you see a report on your screen, which has some data regarding difficulty of the question, student performance, okay, pre-parikshan test, how many appeared, what was the level of competition that you faced in the examination, okay, things like that. Now look at the data that we have on our screen. Around 8,400 aspirants appeared in this test. Fine. Average score is at 35. So that is how the competition will look like in the real examination also. Majority will hover around the average marks, but it is the cutoff that we need to aim. Okay. Accuracy rate again was for all the aspirants around 40% or 41%. And then there are exceptional scores, but we need not look at these scores. But the most important thing that we need to look at here is the difficulty level of the questions that are there in the paper. So based on the attempts that you have taken in this paper, the data that we have, it provides us that there were around 21 very tough questions, 53 tough questions, 25 average questions, and one question was only easy in this paper. And that is how the UPSC exam also looks like. This is not that we have decided that these questions were tough or easy. It is based on your attempt. Okay, so for example, very tough questions, they are decided on the basis of how many aspirants are attempting that question. And even after attempting that, how many are getting it correctly. So these two factors are taken into account while deciding that such and such question is very tough. So when you see that there are tough questions around 21, so we see that the other questions that we are left with are around 80 questions. And as I've already outlined, if you target these 80 questions properly, not saying all of you will find these very tough question section tough for everybody, but some of them will be tough for majority of the aspirants who are appearing in the test. So for example, if you are focusing on these parts, the tough questions, average questions, etc., and if you have around 80% accuracy in the in the other 80 questions, that will improve your score properly. And let's say in the very tough questions, you are able to score 3 to 4 properly. So that means you have the flexibility of leaving around 15 questions in the examination. That will bring your attempt to about 85. I'm not saying you will not have any negative question in the examination or negative attempt in the examination, but our whole focus is to reduce the negative marks in the examination. Okay. So while devising a strategy, we can focus that, okay, when the very tough questions are there, we can skip such and such questions there. Fine. So that is how 80 questions were doable in this paper. And these 20 questions could have been skipped. I'm saying some of you might have been able to score, let's say 4 questions out of the very tough questions. So that will be additional for you. Fine. But focus should be on improving the accuracy in this particular section, the tough ones, easy ones, and the average ones. Then you see a graph on your screen. This graph tells us, or it is a bell curve regarding the performance of the aspirants. So let's say how many aspirants were above the score of 81. So there were around 363 students who scored above 80 out of the 8,400 people who attempted this test. So according to our analysis, I would say a score of 90 and above is an exceptionally well performance in this paper, given the level of preparation right now, because most of you will peak around the prelims examination, right? Some of you might have not studied some sections, still they need to be prepared. So I would say anything above 90 was decently well, but then there are students who fall in the category of 70 and 90, or some people who are in the range of 65 to 90. These are the people who have normal attempts, but they need to improve on their accuracy sometimes. And if they improve upon their accuracy, they will be able to get into the section of people who are clearing the cutoff from the prelims examination. So that is what the focus of these aspirants should be. If you are below 60, you need to really focus on improving your knowledge. And again, going back to the books that you have studied or the sources that you have referred to and analyzing where are you missing or what all points are you missing out on. For example, if you had studied polity well, what things went wrong in your polity section? Or are you studying it in the right direction or not? So that thing needs to be focused for people who have scored below 60. So that is one takeaway from here. Then we will look at the score of one of the aspirants who really did well in the exam. So this was the candidate who had scored 131. He was the top scorer in this paper before we released the answer key, of course. After that, some of people have come up who have scored 190, 188 after seeing the answers, of course. But before we released the results and the answers, this guy was a topper. He had 131 marks in the paper. Look at his number of attempts. It was around 87 out of 100. He did not go for a 100 question attempt in the paper. And look at his accuracy rate. It was 81%. So this is the level of accuracy that you need to focus on. So this calls us that attempt should be between 80 to 90 and accuracy should be between 70 to 80% to get a good score in the paper. Okay. So 71 questions were attempted correctly and 16 questions were attempted incorrectly by this candidate. And he skipped 13 difficult questions that he found were not suitable for answering in the examination. So that is how this can be an ideal candidate for you to follow. Okay, this is the thing that I need to focus. Fine. So this has given us a very good insight about the strategy that you can devise. Now, based on your attempts, we have also got the reports of which all questions were easy, very tough that I've already outlined. So here, from here on, we'll take up the questions, look at the logic of formulating that question, and also how you could have solved that question by applying our common knowledge or the knowledge that we already have. Okay. And how some of you might have faltered in applying the presence of mind at that point of time, or what silly mistake did you commit. So just keep on following the discussion that I'm doing, and you keep on analyzing that what mistake you did or what point you did not get while solving that particular question. So let us look at which all questions were the easiest questions in this paper. So we have seen that there was only one easy question in the paper, and this was related to the gharial, magar crocodile, saltwater crocodile that are found in the following states. Some of the logics that you might have applied is, okay, a question has already come in the previous years related to gharials, isn't it? It was asked related to Chambal River back in 2017 or 18, I guess. Then regarding Odisha, we already listened about some of the national parks like Bhitarkanika National Park, where the magar crocodiles are found. And by applying that logic, majority of you might have clicked the Odisha. And Odisha is already famous for all the crocodile species. Fine. And that is why your attempt was around 7,000 aspirants attempted this question. 5,000 got it correct. That is, accuracy rate was around 70% in this particular question. Okay. That is why this question was easy. Now let's look at the interesting questions which were tricky in this paper. So there were around 3 questions that were tricky. So first question that we see on our screen is from the environment section. This is a favorite area of UPSC. UPSC will keep on asking such questions which will make you think in the examination. No sort of knowledge and no sort of sources will help you in solving such questions. There are no sources for such questions. It is only the presence of minds or the basic logic that you develop while studying the environment section. For example, in 2017, a question was asked, if butterflies in an area died, what would be its consequence? So how will you think on that question? So you will have an ecological approach. Okay, if butterfly is in the food web of, where does the butterfly lie in the food chain or the food web? So if butterflies are eliminated, the animals or things that are dependent upon the butterflies will definitely be affected. So that is the approach that we apply there, isn't it? Is it visible? If you are not able to see this, you just need to zoom in on your, if you are watching it on the mobile, just zoom in by using your pinch. Okay. So in this question, if all the butterflies of the world died, which of the following would be its consequence? Of course, some of the birds which are dependent on, if the bees of the world died, so some of the birds we know are dependent on bees. And if these bees die, there will be disruption in the ecosystem of that. So look at this, look at the word that is there. Some of the birds would die. Of course, some of the birds can die. If an ecological system or ecosystem is disrupted, it impacts some of the candidates of which are part of that ecosystem. But it does not have to necessarily impact all the things or all the participants of that ecosystem. Okay, or it will not fully eliminate that. That is why the second statement, that it will lead to famine due to crop loss. Famine is a very extreme thing to happen. Famine does not necessarily happen because of loss of bees in the world. Majority of the population of the world is dependent on cereal for their nutrition, and cereals are the one which are not dependent on bees for their pollination. The basic function of bees is to pollinate. For example, crops like wheat, etc., they are mainly focused on, or they germinate based on wind pollination. And that is why they are not likely to be much affected by the loss of population of the bees. But they are going to affect the diversity and all. So it will not lead to famine. We will devise some strategies, or the existing strategies of pollination will be applicable here. That is why a famine-like situation is a very extreme situation. And majority of the famines are not ecological disasters. They are man-made disasters. We all know that, isn't it? Because majority of the famines, where are they happening right now? They are happening where? In the zones that are conflict zones. For example, Yemen is facing famine-like situation, or South Sudan is facing that. Afghanistan might face in the near future. So that is how you apply the logic. Then fruits and vegetables would become extinct. This is again an extreme statement. How would fruits and vegetables become extinct? The other forms of pollination or the other sources of pollination will again be at play in this situation. And that is why the first statement looks really logical here, that some might be affected, so that's fine. And that is why this kind of understanding of the questions and the common sense and the logic that you apply in the real examination made this question a really tricky one. Now, why was it tricky? Because 7,000 aspirants attempted this question and just 17% could answer it accurately. That is 6,000 marked it wrong and 1,265 marked it right. So such tricky questions will always be there in the examination. Then let's look at this question. This again was in the tricky section. Okay. So this question is about rights. Most of us go with a preconceived notion of fundamental rights in our mind, isn't it? We are mostly focused on preparing while polity. We are focused on fundamental rights only. And that is why majority of you might have got this question wrong. And if you had just read the basic book of NCERT of political theory of class 11th and have read about the conception of rights in a society, or what rights exactly mean, or the basic meaning of the right, you would have easily understood the first statement that is given here. So the nature of the rights is very wide. It is not just dependent upon the legal or the constitutional recognition of the rights on which the rights are claimed in a society. Rights are more larger than that. For example, we have human rights. Okay, we have natural rights, isn't it? Or you can think of a scenario where, let's say, we already have some rights that have been recognized by the constitution, which can be fundamental rights, or some rights like the right to property, which is a constitutional right. Then there are some legal rights like let's say right to food, the National Food Security Act, or Right to Information Act. That is also a legal right, isn't it? But that does not mean the demand for right to information was not there. It was already there. So the larger rights is a larger subset. Legal and the constitutional recognition is just a subset of the larger rights that a society has. Okay. For example, the beautiful example for this can be South African regime. South Africa faced the problem of apartheid. Apartheid regime aimed at discriminating against the black people of South Africa. But that does not mean their rights died. They kept on fighting for their rights and gained them and gained the legal recognition. Of course, legal recognition provides a special status, but it is not the basis. Rights are already more larger as compared to the legal recognition. There can be times when rights have not been recognized legally, but still people are fighting for these rights. So that is how you need to understand the basic concept of rights from these basic books. And if you had read and understood that in entirety, that is what I am talking about, that initially I talked about, the application of the knowledge. It is not just knowledge. It is not a fact. You will not find such facts anywhere. It is the application of the knowledge that will matter most in such kind of questions that are asked. Second statement, of course, was obvious. Rights place obligation on the state as well as on the citizen. Rights place obligation on the state. That is the common philosophy of the fundamental rights or rights, let's say. But it places obligation on the citizens as well. For example, the Article 19, which is related to freedom of expression, also places certain reasonable restrictions so that you do not misuse your right to freedom of speech and expression for instigating violence. So that places obligations also on us that we don't misuse it, isn't it? So that is why second statement was correct. So the first statement did not stand the scrutiny of the definition or the common understanding of the rights. And you could have prepared this particular section from the political theory NCERT of class 11th, where all these concepts like rights, liberty, also last year you might have seen, last year and also before that, questions have been asked from these particular concepts like liberty, equality. So this becomes a very important part. So if you are noting down, just note down that you need to prepare these particular sections properly. Okay, just go to that book. This is the source, and that is how you need to understand or keep on applying your knowledge that you gain while preparing. And again, look at the accuracy. In this question, it was only 8.9%. Because we could not apply this simple logic, and majority of the time, the logic also originates from the kind of knowledge that you have acquired. If you have limited your sources, kept on revising them, and you have understood them in entirety or not, that is what matters. Then look at this question. This question is also a tricky question. I don't understand why. It's a very straightforward question. And this question, if you have read the Lakshmikant properly and applied that knowledge, you could have easily answered this question. Okay, let's look at the accuracy. It's around 20% in this question. So let's read the statements carefully here. The first statement reads, any person suitable to be a member of the parliament can be made a union minister. Can anyone tell me why? Why is this statement correct? Write it in chat. Is anybody facing the 6-month rule? Yes. So if a candidate is otherwise eligible for becoming a member of parliament, can be made a union minister, provided he gets elected in the next 6 months. Okay, so that is the rule here. So that is why this was one common understanding related to this. Then we have the second statement. Second statement is directly from the Article 75, where we have already read that ministers shall hold the office during the pleasure of the president. Then the third statement was a bit based on understanding the term cabinet has not been used in the constitution. Initially, it was not used, but when after the national emergency in 1975, the constitution was amended in the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, this term cabinet was inserted to safeguard the misuse of national emergency. And that is where the term got mentioned into the constitution. So third statement is incorrect, has not been used. Then if any advice is tendered by the Union Council of Ministers, the president has to necessarily follow it. He does not have to necessarily follow it. He can send it for reconsideration, right? So that is why this fourth statement was incorrect. So that is the simple level of understanding and the application of knowledge. And this was a multi-dimensional question, because although it was about the Council of Ministers, but it also had to be understood from the national emergency point of view, because that is where the concept was included. Okay, so these were the three tricky questions that were part of our paper. Then let's look at which all questions were very tough and why these questions were tough and why these questions could have been skipped in the examination if we find it tough. So this first question that you see on your screen is related to guidelines for geospatial data. Okay, now guidelines will be released by some ministry or some department. So are you confident enough that such and such ministry has released this guideline or not? Are you aware of that? If you are aware of that, it's well and good. That is where, if you have prepared current affairs properly, the role of current affairs will come into play. And that is how you should attempt this question, or you should skip this question if you don't know anything about it. Don't apply the logics. If you apply the logics, definitely you will mark it incorrectly. Okay. So here, it is not the Surveyor General of India, which is commonly assumed. It is the Department of Science and Technology which has released these guidelines. So first statement could have been eliminated, and the second and third ones are correct. Look at the accuracy rate. It is around 11.84% because of the current affair base, plus because of the factual information that was part of this question, which is not a very common fold information, right? It is not a very common information that geospatial guidelines data have been released by which ministry. If you have prepared well, fine. If you have not prepared, skip this question in the exam. Then this question was specifically inserted into the paper that majority of you should skip this question. Now, mouse deer, it is not a very famous species that comes into news regularly. Okay. But this had come into the news because what used to happen is that earlier, while including the species of animals into the Wildlife Protection Act, the characteristics or the naming of the species was done based on the physical characteristics. But as the technology has evolved, what has happened is that the genetic coding of these species is now being taken into account. And that is how even within one species that was earlier understood, the more number of species are coming out because of the genetic variations that are there inside that. And that's why new names are coming up. And that is what the whole controversy was related to. And some activists had raised concern that most of these species which were earlier part of Wildlife Protection Act, the new species that are being discovered are not being included. And that is why they are not being protected. Okay. So that was the concern. But this question was a really difficult one to answer in the examination and could have been skipped clearly. Look at the accuracy rate. It is 16%. No need of attempting such questions. Then again, this question. Yes, this was a tough question, but I'll try to apply some logic here so that you can solve this question, or you can develop such kind of correlations while attempting questions in history. First statement is that Wellesley made Sadar Divani, and the Nijamat Adalat independent of supervision of the Governor General and the Council. Now, if you read about the Governor Generals of India, Lord Cornwallis is most famous for administrative reforms, isn't it? He brought out what is known as Cornwallis Code. And Cornwallis Code was the one which first promoted separation of power in India, isn't it? He divested the collectors of their judicial powers. So that was one important thing related to Cornwallis. And after Cornwallis, Lord Wellesley came to India. And he from there on carried on the policies of Cornwallis and further expanded or applied this concept of separation of power. And that is why he made the Sadar Divani and the Nijamat Adalat independent of supervision of the Governor General and the Council. And hence the first statement is correct. I know this is a difficult logic to apply in the examination, but if you had correlated these things, okay, Cornwallis had applied these reforms. What did Wellesley do with that? Or what did William Bentinck do with that? Fine. Second statement here, the logic of including this statement was that in last 2 years or one or 2 years, UPSC has asked that Wellesley was the one who was responsible for the creation of Fort William College in Kolkata, isn't it? He was the one who introduced subsidiary alliance, right? Or he was the one who applied subsidiary alliance properly, isn't it? So while applying subsidiary alliance, he also wanted to understand the nature of Indian society and also train civil servants who are suitable for Indian conditions. So for the second cause, for training the civil servants suitable for Indian conditions, he created the Fort William College. And for better understanding of the Indian society, he created a Persian secretariat. So Wellesley was the one who created these things. So this is a common fact. This is their part of the books. But William Bentinck did not do it. William Bentinck was famous for some other things like sati, abolition of sati, etc. So that is how you prepare these topics while reading history or something. Okay. So first statement will be correct and second will be incorrect. So this was a difficult question. Either you know it or you skip it, or if you are able to apply some logic. So this is the kind of correlation that you will have to create in the examination. And that is what is meant by applying the knowledge and having a presence of mind, keeping your eyes and ears open while attempting the question and not just getting frightened by looking at the question. Oh, I don't know about this. Okay, or getting away with that. Again, accuracy rate is 19% here. And even the number of attempts is very less. It's around 3,400. Next important thing about modern history is that there are multiple stakeholders in the Indian nationalist movement. These are labor class, the peasantry, farmers, right? Women. So there are different stakeholders in the Indian constitution, and capitalist class was also one of them. Now, if you had read the basic text of Bipan Chandra, it is clearly mentioned that although some of the capitalists supported the cause of Mahatma Gandhi during the non-cooperation movement, there were others who did not support. And that is why Purushottam Das, Thakur Das, and R.D. Tata started anti-non-cooperation society in Bombay. Now, most of us have a very soft corner for Tatas. And that is why we might have thought that, okay, Tatas cannot create an anti-non-cooperation. They might have supported the cause of Mahatma Gandhi, but they did not. That is the sheer fact of history that we need to understand. And again, they were provided representation to the industrialists in the central and the provincial legislative council, which is again a fact. You need to learn all these stakeholders in all the movements. So what was the role of women in this particular movement? Or did Muslims participate or not? Or what was the role of peasantry? How well were the masses mobilized in this particular movement? So these are some things that you need to keep in mind. And that is why such and such a question was asked in the examination. So whole idea of formulating the question and analyzing the things is to make you understand the approach for studying these particular topics. Some of you might be skipping these aspects, but now after getting this insight, you need to apply this logic while studying. So even while studying, you need to understand, okay, the question can be asked from such and such angles in this particular topic. Okay, so that should be our focus. Again, 31% accuracy. And this is again a standalone fact. This is a difficult question. This was similar to the Desher Katha question that was there in last year's paper. Nobody knew about it, but this is part of your Bipan Chandra. So studying basic books is non-negotiable for the preparation. Keep that in mind. Okay. Then again, oil seeds in India. Why was this question included? Can anybody tell me? Why is this important? This is the whole intention of taking. Okay. Palm oil. Okay, perfect. Reduce imports. Import bill surge. Recently mission launched. Palm oil. Rise of rice. That was the primary reason. There has been increase or rise in the prices of oil seeds recently, and that is why oil seeds are very important. Also, previously, UPSC has asked questions. So look at the question. Current affair context was that the prices of oil are rising. So that should make you curious about what exactly is the composition of India's oil production, or are we exporting or are we importing? So that should be our natural focus. And in one of the Indian Express explained section, I have explained this composition of the oil production in India, or where are we importing from, or which all crops contribute to the largest oil seed production. So here, soybean has the highest contribution in a total oilseed production. This is again a factual thing, but while preparing, if you had followed such kind of curiosity and level of awareness, you would have been able to attempt this question in the examination. Otherwise, you will be caught off guard in the exam. Okay, what to do with such kind of questions that are asked? Again, 29% accuracy. Then we have this concept of flash drought, which is related to the monsoon breaks that happen in the monsoon. And they are very rapid and are known for rapid intensification and high evapotranspiration. But the irony is that India does not recognize such flash droughts. And that is what is the whole concern about. And that is what makes it a really important question. Again, accuracy was 23%. Then this E-flow norm. Look at this question. Is it any unique question? Is it any difficult question that we have posed? It is a very common fact related to National Mission for Clean Ganga. We all have been studying. But this is one question that is related to E-flow norms that have been given out by Government of India. And here we should understand that these E-flow norms, and they were all on PIV. That is why they have been included in the question here, in the question paper. So idea is that you get a logic. Now the natural thing that comes into mind is, where will these be applicable? So are they applicable on the entire stretch of Ganga or not? So this is how you delineate or decipher the facts that are there in a part of any notification that is there. But if you don't know about the notification, you should, or you have the liberty of skipping it. Again, the accuracy has fallen really down. Then this question is related to the physical geography of India. already a lot of questions are asked from Western Ghats, the Eastern Ghats, etc. Isn't it? UPSC, it is UPSC's favorite area. So look at the first statement here. Jindagada Peak is the highest point of Eastern Ghats. A fact that you need to be aware, which is the highest point of Western Ghat, which is the highest point of Eastern Ghat. This should be your common understanding while studying these topics. The second statement, the religious town of Tirupati is located in Javadi Hills. So this might have concerned some of the aspirants that such statement should not have been incorporated. But the logic here is that Tirupati is one of the important religious places. It's a very famous place. Then Tirupati is located in the Sheshchalam Hills. Sheshchalam is also biosphere reserve. That is how you correlate. You have related culture with environment, isn't it? In that particular biosphere reserve, this important religious town is also located. So this is the correlation that you need to create while preparing or while analyzing. So have you understood that while analyzing the paper, you might have not have analyzed the paper according to this thing that we are discussing here. You might have just checked, okay, this statement was wrong, this statement was right, fine, my question was wrong or right, that's it. So these things need to be taken care of. And then there is third statement, Biliranga Hills connect Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats. Again, UPSC this is favorite area of UPSC. Where do the Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats converge? Last time in 2017, they asked a question, according to ecological characteristics, where do the Eastern Ghats and the Western Ghats connect ecologically? So the option was Satyamangalam Tiger Reserve. Again, this needs to be part of your preparation. It is a part of your prelims compass as well. Fine. Then why is a question related to biological and toxin weapon convention asked in this paper? Tell me. You can tell it in the chat box. Sir, audio and slide on the screens are out of sync. Is it only for me? You can first disconnect and then reconnect. Perfectly fine. We are getting some answers. Corona leak theory, COVID conspiracy, bioterrorism article. Perfect. Perfect. That means you are following the current affairs. But the question is from one important convention related to that. Okay. So that is why this particular question was asked. And in this regard, you need to understand some conventions related to that. And that is how UPSC has also asked questions. For example, in previous years, it has asked questions related to NSG, NPT, IAEA, all important conventions that are continuously seen in the news. That is why this convention also became important. But the important thing while reading conventions, as I had already outlined in the QIP in international relations, if you are studying any convention, the most important fact is that what are the key details, who all are the members, what are the objectives, and lastly, is there any mechanism for compliance of the state parties or not? For example, in case of NPT or the Non-Proliferation Treaty, we have the IAEA or the International Atomic Energy Agency. Okay, that takes care of the implementation of the NPT, but such mechanism has not been created for BTWC. So that is how, while preparing conventions, keep in mind which is the implementing agency or which agency will ensure compliance with this particular convention or the provisions of that convention. That is why this was created with the intention of making you understand that you look out for such informations while preparing the other conventions as well. Okay. Then again, this is a very straightforward question from the current affairs, of course, but difficult one. Because if you have prepared these locations already in the previous years, we have seen questions from the conflict zones like Mazar-e-Sharif or Mosul in Iraq, isn't it? Questions have been asked from that section. That is why before we prepared this test, Afghanistan was not fully taken over by Taliban. Unfortunately, it has now been taken over by Taliban completely. So these were the towns that were in news. So Kalaina and Targundi both are part of Afghanistan. And Mekelle is from another conflict zone that is in Ethiopia, where political churning is going on, and it is the capital of the Tigray region of Ethiopia. That is why this question was asked. So applying simple current affairs knowledge could have helped if you had prepared these things properly. So learning things and understanding them in right context is very important. Again, the B question we have already seen, it was a difficult question. Then there are some questions which are really, really factual. These questions, either you know them or you don't know them. Skip them in the examination. For example, Ittar was discovered during the reign of Akbar. Who knows? Abul Fazal comments that saltpeter is used as means for cooling water. If I've studied, I'll know. If I've not studied, I'll not know. Okay. Then Abul Fazl was aware of the discovery of America. If you have studied, fine. If you have not studied, skip it. Okay, so such questions are meant to be skipped. Then there are questions like these. Consider the following about the local self-government of Chola Empire. Local self-government is the most important aspect of Chola Empire, isn't it? We are all aware. It's a part of Tamil Nadu NCRT. It's a part of your ancient history NCRTs. Anywhere you read about Chola Kingdom, you will read about the local self-government. In this, if you had applied your basic knowledge of the local self-government, you could have easily answered this question. Fine. For example, Mahasabha was a gathering of adult men in all villages. So this all villages should have intrigued you while solving the question. It was not in all villages. It was only in the villages that were given to the Brahmins. And in those villages, these villages were known as Agrahams. Okay. And these villages had relative autonomy. And if these villages had autonomy, they will definitely have some powers related to distribution of new lands and exercising ownership rights over them. Okay. So that is how you solve the questions, by applying your knowledge. Now, this was a very interesting question in the polity section. It was related to 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. It's a very basic thing that you should have prepared from the Lakshmikant polity and answered it. But majority of the aspirants might have skipped the incorrect part here. Isn't it? While reading. So this is where the presence of mind comes in. If you are aware, if you are present in the paper, you will definitely solve this question correctly. For example, the ward committees have to be constituted in non-municipalities. No, only in those municipalities which have a population of more than 3 lakh. That is the constitutional provision itself. Second, chairperson of the municipality has to be directly elected. This is basic fact. While studying 73rd and 74th, we always study the compulsory sections and the non-compulsory sections, isn't it? So that is where you will understand that this has been left to the state legislatures to provide for how the manner of election of the chairperson of the municipality. Then lastly, chairperson of the district planning committee is the district collector. It is not so. The choice has been provided to state legislature. They can provide that, okay, district collector will be the chairperson or some other functionary will be the chairperson. And that is how all these statements that were given were incorrect. Okay. And again, the rights question, this was also a difficult question. So this, after understanding the nature of the questions, some were tricky, some were, these were very difficult questions. So in this question, our biggest takeaway is what? Either you know the information or you don't know it. If you don't know it, skip these questions. If you are able to apply some extended logic by having a presence of mind, you can attempt these questions. But again, it is suggested that do it if you are confident enough while attempting such things. In tricky questions, you can always answer the questions by applying the common sense and the common logic while that we have developed while preparation. This takes us to now what we will do is that we will quickly look at the question subject wise. In which subject, what kind of question? I'll take up all your concerns after the discussion, after Baswa sir completes it. So you can just wait for that till moment. Write down your queries if you have any. So I'll just first complete, then Baswa sir will take over, and in the last part of this session, we'll take queries from all of you and we'll help you understand your strategies. Okay. So in this coming part, what we'll do is that we'll take up particular subjects, and in these subjects, we'll understand as to which all questions should have been done, or how easy were the questions, or how which all questions were difficult ones and should have been skipped. Okay. So can you see the paper on the screen? See, the questions will not be very clearly visible. For people using laptop, of course, they will be visible. But for those who are using it on phone, you need to zoom in a bit while solving these questions. Okay. So here, what I'll do is that I'll quickly let you know the logic of asking these questions and how they were inspired from some previous year questions or how they were inspired from the current affairs. And that is what is our understanding of the manner in which UPSC asks its questions, or how the questions will be asked from the current affairs section. Not saying that these questions will be repeated in the exam, but that is how you prepare while in your preparation phase for the prelims examination. Okay. So let's look at this section. It is related to polity. In the polity, first question is related to MG Narega. Now, why MG Narega was important last year? Because of the COVID crisis, we have seen high levels of unemployment. Narega has come to the rescue of the poorest people of our country. That is what was the objective of the Narega scheme. Again, Narega is one of the flagship schemes of the government of India, and that is why it always is an important thing for the examination. Fine. Then if you look at the participation, or the nature of NREGA scheme, you will find that it is one of the most inclusive schemes that the government of India has launched. Okay, so in this, the first statement, which reads, women participation has been less than men participation in the NREGA scheme in the last 5 years. It is not correct, because the women participation has been more. Then the participation of ST beneficiaries in the NREGA scheme is more than the representation in the population of people. Yes, it is so. And finally, the burden of wages or the expenditure that is done on the wages is borne entirely by the center. That is provided in the scheme's legislation itself. That is why it becomes an important. National education policy, again, was a part of our current affairs, isn't it? Then in the current affair, if the national education policy is a part of the current affairs, we need to be thorough with all the provisions of the NEP. What are the key announcements and what are the key objectives of the government of India? So clearly, in this question, we just needed to be aware of the first statement that is given here. So in the national education policy, if you look at this first statement, it was related to gross enrollment ratio in the higher education to be raised by 100% by 2035. This was not one of the objectives. The most primary objective was raising the primary education enrollment ratio to 100% by 2030. Eliminate one, eliminate three options. Even if you don't know 2 and 3 statement, by applying this common sense, common logic, the answer is here. Fine. Then NHRC was in news because the law related to NHRC has been amended. Earlier it provided that the chairman of the commission shall be retired Chief Justice of India. But now this thing has been changed. It is not necessary that the chairperson should necessarily be the retired Chief Justice. Okay, other judges of the Supreme Court who are retired can also become the member. Other two provisions are relatively simple because the commission does not have the power to order, arrest or sentence the culprits, and cases older than 12 months are not taken for consideration of the NHRC. So again, these questions were from current affairs, on part of objectives, important provisions of the policy, important provisions of the schemes or the acts that have been enacted for social welfare by the government. And again, this is one of the statutory body that we have. Look at this question. This was again in the current affairs, and a particular amendment was done in the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 2020. Now, if you are aware of this amendment, it's fine. If you are not aware, you can skip it in the examination. So this was exactly the wrong statement, because it was not provided that under the act, the registered person can accept foreign contribution in any branch of the scheduled bank. It is not so. It is only provided for in this specific branch, so that government of India can control the foreign contribution regulation properly. Okay, that is why they made it a compulsion in the FCRA that the foreign contribution can be only taken in particular or specific branches of the banks. Okay, so that is how they can control these things. Fine. Then tribunals. Tribunal is a very, very beautiful question or very beautiful topic, I would say. Recently, Tribunal Reforms Amendment has been introduced in the Lok Sabha to reform the tribunal structure of India. So while studying such kind of current affairs, what we need to do? We always need to go back to the static portion related to that. That made us understand the constitutional provisions related to tribunals in India. And we all know that. What are the articles? 323A and B. In case of A, administrative tribunals, it is the parliament. But in case of 323B, even the state legislatures can make or create tribunals. That is why first statement was correct. Okay. Second statement, the appeal against the order of the Central Administrative Tribunal cannot be directly made in the Supreme Court. Yes. Earlier it was provided, but then it was changed. Okay. So looking at this page, there were around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. In these 5 questions, if we applied our logic, had a good command over the current affairs, we could have solved most of the questions. If we didn't know the current affairs, we could have skipped this question particularly, because this was not a very, I must say, this was not regularly in news, but all these others were regularly in news. That is why static questions based on them and some questions directly related to current affairs or these policies of the government of India. Let's look at the next page. Here in the polity part, we can see that there are some interesting questions here. Okay. First question is related to election petition. Election petition was in news because Mamata Banerjee, who has been elected as the CM of West Bengal, had lost her elections. Okay. But when she lost the elections, she had filed an election petition. So even when it is not current affairs, the Representation of People Act is already a very important aspect for us from the prelims examination perspective. Questions are regularly asked from the Representation of People Act. That is why what is election petition, where it can be filed, all these aspects needed to be taken care of. So it can be only filed by one of the candidates to the disputed election? No. Even an elector can file such complaints. And the courts have original jurisdiction over the election petition? Yes, original, because the petitioner can directly move to high courts in such cases. Like we have in the case of fundamental rights, where a petitioner can directly go to the Supreme Court, not by the way of appeal. Okay. Then, Speaker of the Lok Sabha. Now, this question is about Speaker, but this was again in news because what is happening in Maharashtra State Assembly is that they are not appointing any Speaker. So that is why there is presently no Speaker in the State Assembly of Maharashtra. And that is why the provisions related to this particular issue need to be clear. Okay. So this particular question has been created in this particular case. So if you look at the second statement, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha resigns from his office by writing to the President? No. He resigns by writing to the Deputy Speaker. Okay. In case of Rajya Sabha, the chairperson resigns by writing to the President because he is also the Vice President of India, isn't it? So these common logics need to be applied while solving the question. Then this question, we have already seen the 74th Amendment Act, basic question related to 73rd and 74th municipalities and panchayats in India. Then Lokpal and Lok Ayukta Act is also one of the key legislations of India for reducing corruption in the Indian government. And this was also in news for last few years because there were no appointments of Lok Ayukta or Lokpal at the central level. That is why. And we also note that Prime Minister is one of the important functionaries in the government of India. So what are the provisions related to Prime Minister, or how is the Lokpal Act holding Prime Minister accountable becomes a very important part, isn't it? So in this, you just needed to know about this important provision that a complaint against the Prime Minister can only be probed if the full Lokpal bench considers the initiation of an inquiry. This is correct. But the second part is wrong. That is, it need not approve it unanimously, but it must be approved by 2/3 majority of the Lok Sabha bench, the Lokpal bench. Fine. Third statement, of course, is correct here. And second statement is again incorrect. Fine. So when you are studying any constitutional body, any statutory body, or any other body that has been created, how the chairperson is elected, how the members are elected, are they independent or not, what are the provisions related to independence of that particular office that have been incorporated, all these things are really important for us from the prelims examination. Then we have the common questions. In polity section, prepare well DPSPs, fundamental rights, and fundamental duties. You will always find questions in the prelims examination from these particular sections. They will more of be on the part of understanding based questions rather than mere mugging up of the facts related to fundamental rights or fundamental duties. Okay, so understanding will be a key aspect here. Fine. So from here on, let's move on to the other sections. Let's look at geography now. Now in the geography, environment and agriculture section, we note that it takes major portion of our paper even at the prelims examination level. That's why 30 odd questions were included from these three topics: geography, environment, and agriculture. You will see questions regularly in the examination, and these are the questions which are sometimes factual, but if you have prepared them well, you could answer these questions. For example, we have all been listening about electric vehicles in India. Okay, electric vehicles require lithium ion battery. For that, lithium is a very important resource. And related to that, we all study about ABC triangle, or the lithium triangle as it is known, which is located in South America, in the countries Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, etc. But there has to be a curiosity that which is the largest producer. It's a very simple thing that we need to understand. So while preparing, there should be a curiosity: who is the largest producer, or how these countries who are making the electric vehicles are getting the lithium from. So here answer is Australia. Fine. Then Bharat Puja River. Again, while formulating questions and studying geography, we all know that west flowing rivers are of extreme importance. Not that east flowing are less important, but west flowing are also very important because they have unique geography. So we needed to be aware of the Bharat Puja, which is the second largest river of Kerala. And it does not arise in Nallamalla, but it arises in Annamalai. That's why first statement is incorrect. Second statement was part of current affairs because a reserve forest has been declared here. And it lies at the tri-junction of three states, Goa, Maharashtra, and Karnataka. That's why Tillari River, and it originates from Sahyadri. This was a bit obscure fact. If you knew it, fine. Didn't know it, you could have skipped this question. Then look at this question number 25. The borders of which of the following countries do not converge within the Karakoram system? And we are asked to identify which do not converge, not which all converge. Fine. So when we have studied Himalayas, we should be aware that Nepal does not have anything to do with Karakoram range, Karakoram system. Okay. And by this, if you look at the options, where is Nepal mentioned? Only in one option, 2 and 5 only. Fine. So this is where the presence of mind comes in. Good. Soybean has already been dealt with. Again, islands are important. In the island section, the geography of these islands, what is the location of such and such thing, needs to be taken care of properly. Question was already asked on 10-degree channel in the previous years. That is why we have been required to arrange 10-degree Coco Channel and Duncan Passage. You all might be aware, Coco Channel lies between Andaman Islands and the Myanmar, or the islands of Myanmar, Coco Island. Then the Duncan Passage, it is between the South Andaman and the Little Andaman. 10-degree channel, of course, it divides the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. You have to arrange them. So Coco, then Duncan Passage, then 10-degree. Okay. So in the geography section, you need to prepare physical features properly, analyze the previous year question papers, and understand the nature of questions that have been asked, and keep on preparing these regularly. So you can dedicate an hour for these. Still 50 days are left from here on, and you can move from here on. Okay. Then let's take up the environment section. Now, this particular question is related to one of the important observations of FAO regarding a tropical disease or infection that is spreading in an important fruit of India. Varieties of that fruit has also been provided. Now, agriculture has become one of the important or favorite areas of UPSC. So questions become difficult in this section. So this is again a current affair as well as some information related to agriculture, because if you know about some of the varieties of this particular fruit, you could have answered this. Answer here is banana. Okay. Again, I have told you mouse deer was a difficult question, could have been skipped in the examination. E-flow norms we've already dealt with. Look at this interesting question. Kaziranga National Park is given in this. There are 3 national parks. We are required to match it with the species or animals that are found here. Now, if you just knew that in India, Javan rhinoceros is not found. Only one horned rhinoceros is found. You could have easily eliminated third. Eliminating third, we eliminate B, C, and D. So these kind of permutation combinations also need to be applied in the exam. Okay, eliminate some statements, try to eliminate by the knowledge that you already have, and then try to answer the questions. Fine. And the first and the second national parks were particularly important because these are the newly created national parks of Assam. Okay, so that's why this question came up. Then this question related to GM rubber. Now, genetically modified rubber was being developed by Rubber Research Institute of Kerala. But there was opposition regarding usage of such GM rubber in Kerala state itself. And that is why it was not planted in Kerala, but it was planted in Guwahati. So first statement is wrong. Second is that it will help the rubber to survive the cold conditions in the winter season, which is a correct statement, because that is why this GM rubber is being created in the first place. Already, previously you might have seen questions have been asked related to GM mustard or BT cotton. So that is why anything related to biotechnology that are in news become very important for us from the prelims examination perspective. Okay. Then let's look at this question. This is one of the favorite areas of UPSC, from which UPSC asked the question regarding famous pollutants and their impacts. Okay. In this question, how does the What is meant by reactive nitrogen pollutant? Nitrogen is normally found in a very stable state, that is N2. But it becomes reactive when its composition is changed either in artificial processes or by natural processes like lightning or the nitrogen fixation that is done by some particular bacteria. Now, when this nitrogen gets converted into reactive nitrogen, and if it is produced more in quantity, then it can have some deleterious effects on India's on the environment. Okay, so in this case, the nitrous oxide is a gas which is a global warming gas or a greenhouse gas. Then damage to ozone layer. Now, majority of the hydrofluorocarbons, they are responsible for ozone depletion. And in this, some of these chemicals act as a catalyst for breaking ozone molecule. So they break it, and that is how ozone is created. A single oxygen atom is created. It again combines with the other oxygen atoms and forms O2, which is a stable state. So that is how these chemicals act as a catalyst. Similarly, nitrogen pollution has also been found to be impacting the ozone layer. And loss of biodiversity, for that, a common and a simple example is eutrophication of lakes, which is a common knowledge from the basic NCERT of biology, where if we flood more amount of nutrients into any water body, its biodiversity will be lost because of the growth of plants, and eventually the lake will die. Then this question, black giant squirrel and its natural habitat. Look at this question. Black giant squirrel was in news. Black giant squirrel is also known as Malayan giant squirrel. Okay. Here in this, now Malayan giant squirrel, as it is also known as Malayan giant squirrel, we note that the Malaya Peninsula is on the eastern part of India. Okay, it's not part of India, of course. It is in the eastern side of India, or it is close to the northeastern states of India. And in the options, which national park do you find is closer to the northeastern part of India? Dachigam National Park is located in Jammu and Kashmir. So Western Himalayas. Desert National Park is in Rajasthan. Again, western part of India. Bandipur is in south. So the only option that we are left with is Neora Valley. Neora Valley, as it is located in the West Bengal. That's why it's the correct answer. That is how you approach these things. You understood something, you have learned about something, then you try to relate it with the other name that you know about this, and then the information that is there. Similarly, you might have seen in the previous years, questions have been asked related to Namdapha National Park and Desert National Park, and similarly. So this is one area that we prepare well for the exam. Then we have seen all these questions here. This particular concept is a very important concept related to carbon leakage that was in news, and the European Union has created a mechanism to stop this carbon leakage. Now, what this means is that, now what is happening is that the green consciousness is coming in countries across the globe. And what is happening there is that these countries are now creating legislations to minimize the greenhouse gas emissions by imposing restrictive policies. And what the MNCs or the companies in these countries are doing is that they are moving out to those countries which do not have such strict laws related to greenhouse gas emissions. So indirectly, by imposing strict laws for reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, these countries are now motivating the MNCs to move into other countries where the laws are less restrictive. And that is what has been termed as carbon leakage. Okay. Then I would like to conclude this by just looking at the agriculture section, which is again a very important section, and then Baswa sir would continue. Now, in the agriculture section, we have seen some really difficult questions are asked by UPSC these days. For example, last year there was a question related to sugarcane cultivation, or what is the process of sugarcane cultivation, how the seeds are sown, so all this information. So accordingly, this is important. So this question related to global warming and important crops of India, we have given here. Here, there are 3 crops that are given. In this, we need to be aware that there are certain crops which require more amount of carbon fertilization in the atmosphere for their growth. And that is why crops like potatoes and legumes will be positively impacted by global warming because of increased carbon concentration in the atmosphere. But other crops like wheat, etc., will be impacted because if warming increases, the Rabi season in which the wheat is grown might be reduced. Okay, winters will be affected. That's how These are, so this is a factual information. Just learn the explanation that have been provided here. Then we have this question related to soil moisture conservation, mulching, deep tillage, and minimum tillage. Mulching is simply covering the soil by either leaves or artificially. Minimum tillage is always in news, or it has been a favorite area of UPSC. It has asked questions related to zero tillage or minimum tillage. So minimum tillage, that is, you don't till the land much so much that it loses its soil moisture. But again, this is one interesting option that is here, that is deep tillage. Will it be correct, or will it be helpful in soil moisture conservation? Yes, there are soils which are compacted, and if the compact soils are there, they have very limited amount of aeration, they have less porosity and less permeability, and that is why they are not able to retain soil moisture. So when such deep tillage is done in such kind of soils, it increases their porosity and permeability, thereby increasing their capacity for soil moisture conservation or retention. Fine. So look at these questions, try and understand. If you find any difficulty, just post them on the eLearn platform and we will see them after the class as well. After this, let's look at some international relations related treaties. Again, I have already outlined that in the IR section. The questions will mostly be from current affairs. For example, this is from the Ladakh region of our northern part of India. This was continuously in news because of attacks by China in this particular territory. And that is why you should know the geography of this. Already last year, a question was asked regarding the location of Siachen Glacier. Okay. So we need to be aware of these things. Then UN clause, particularly this was in news because of the freedom of navigation operation that was conducted by the United States of America near the Lakshadweep Island. And that made us understand the basic clauses of UN clause. So if you look at the statements, the coastal states can create artificial islands in this zone. So in the exclusive economic zones, certain rights are provided to the coastal countries. And creation of artificial islands is one of the rights that has been provided in the EEZ. Again, this was also in news because China is developing such artificial islands in the South China Sea, which it considers as its exclusive economic zone. Okay, and that is what the whole controversy is all about. Then all laws of the coastal territories extend up to this zone is an incorrect statement because not all laws extend to this particular territory, but all laws only extend up to the territorial waters of a country. So second statement is incorrect. Then innocent passage is a fairly simple concept. We have already got some queries regarding the supply chain resilience initiative. It is a very important question. As far as the statements are concerned, UPSC asks such kind of questions in the examination. First is that it will drastically increase the FDI in Indian economy. Second is that it will make India immune to impacts of trade war between US and China. Third is that it will help India in decoupling its economy from import dependency on China. Now, supply chain resilience initiative, you might have all studied which all countries are part of it: India, Japan, and Australia. And this has been created in order to create supply chains which are independent of China. Now, will it increase drastically the foreign direct investment in India? Although it might help, but it will never drastically increase the FDI, because other factors will also be important for increase in FDI and important. It is not just the SCRI initiative, but other factors like how the global economy is functioning, or is India an attractive destination for investment or not. Okay, so drastic change in FDI or investments in India depends on multiplicity of factors. So you can never be sure that supply chain resilience initiative will provide drastic increase in FDI or not. Second is that it will make India immune to the impacts of trade war between US and China. Now, one of the stated objective of creating the SCRI was reducing the impact of trade war. But such kind of initiatives cannot make a country immune. That is, there will be no impact. That is very difficult to say. Okay, so again, this statement was correct. But this again outlines the basic objective of that. We are trying to decouple. That is why the word help has been used. Look at these keywords that are there in the statements. Okay, for example, here the word was drastic, here the word was immune, and here the word was help. Collective defense in this next question was fairly an easy question. It was continuously in news related to North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Again, I have already told in terms of conventions, if you are solving the questions, keep in mind its basic objectives, what all a country needs to do if it wants to become a member, and finally, is there any verification mechanism or not? So in case of NPT, India will have to dismantle its all nuclear weapons, because one of the important clauses in the NPT is that only those countries are recognized as nuclear weapon states who have manufactured or detonated their nuclear weapons or explosives before 1st January 1967. So I think you have fairly got an idea as to how the paper should have been attempted, or how the knowledge that you already had should have been applied, or how questions can be asked in the examination, and what was the logic of asking these questions. Some of them were inspired from, of course, current affairs. Others were inspired from, let's say, the static portions, or not necessarily all the questions were asked from the current affairs section. Then we also looked at some strategies of solving the questions, like you should focus on eliminating some of these statements, reading the statements carefully, okay, or while preparing current affairs, also going back to the static portions of our syllabus. So this was all from me. Now Baswa sir will take over from here, and he will help you go through the economy questions that were part of the pre-parikshan test. Thank you so much.